Hi, today we're going to talk about calibrations. So at your plant, there are usually instruments associated with the manufacture of your product that control specific process parameters or measure specific process parameters that ensure product quality. Those instruments typically require calibration to ensure that you consistently manufacture good quality product. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about what calibrations are and kind of how that functions. So in your plant today, you have these instruments. Now these instruments have different functions. So for example, you may have an instrument that takes temperature or pressure or humidity or pH levels. Now some instruments have multiple functions. You'll have instruments that take both temperature and humidity. For each of those functions of an instrument, there are ranges in which the instrument may operate. So an instrument may be good for temperature from 0 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or it may be good from 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 600 degrees Fahrenheit. So the ranges of the instrument, of the functions of the instrument, make a difference. In addition to the ranges that are acceptable for the instrument itself, your process has ranges. And those ranges are likely, they better be, smaller than the operating ranges of the instrument. So for example, in order to make good quality product, maybe your pH has to be between 7 and 7.2. But the reading, the capability or function of the instrument may be able to read from 4 to 9, who knows? So the process range is what's really critical to ensuring your product quality. So that's what we want to kind of calibrate against. Now, those instruments also have tolerance levels, or levels of tolerance inside your process, rather, that's a plus or minus 1 degree of temperature or 5 degrees of temperature is acceptable. Depending on your process, maybe that's the case. If you have a process that's, molting steel at thousands of degrees, plus or minus 10 degrees isn't that big of a difference. But if you were trying to manufacture something in a bioreactor, 10 degrees could make a gigantic difference. And so the tolerance of your process makes a difference. Also, the accuracy of the instrument. So the accuracy of the instrument needs to be known. The testing method then gets developed. So how do we test this instrument? Now, typically that comes from the OEM. However, if your instrument ranges far exceed your process parameters, you may customize that testing method to be closer to your tolerance levels. All of that feeds into a calibration procedure, how you will calibrate the instrument. Now, in order to calibrate the instrument, you need another instrument. Those instruments are called standards. And those standards also have functions, or many functions, a function or many functions. So just like you can have an instrument that does temperature and humidity, you can have a standard that does an awful lot of different functions. Today's world, there are usually you have standards that have multi-functions. Each of those functions have ranges and tolerances as well. Now you want to select a standard that has an accuracy of at least 4 times the accuracy of the instrument that you are testing against. That ensures that the standard can properly calibrate the instrument that you have, or test against the calibration method of the instrument you have. For those standards, they also have to be calibrated. So they have testing methods and calibration procedures. All of this feeds into essentially a work order that either comes out of your calibration management system or your CMMS that says go calibrate the instrument. And on that work order, you'll have the instrument, you'll have the very specific standard that you select at the time of calibration, down to the serial number, and we'll talk about why in a second. And then of course you have to have the calibration procedure. And so you go out into the field and essentially you do your initial set of tests and determine pass-fail. If it is a passing grade, there's another question you have to ask before you can decide it doesn't need calibration, I'll throw a sticker on it. You can pass, but still be very close to the acceptable tolerance range, and so therefore you may want to calibrate the instrument to bring it closer to that middle ground and make sure it's where it really needs to be. And so you would calibrate the instrument. If you go and do the initial test and find a foul, meaning it did not pass its test, that creates what's called an out-of-tolerance event. That out-of-tolerance event notifies people that an instrument has fouled so that they can investigate whether or not there was an impact to product quality. Again, you attempt to calibrate the instrument and bring it back to within its range, and then retest, pass, fail. If you're unable to get the instrument to operate effectively, then it needs to be replaced. If it passes, it gets a cal cert and a sticker on it, or if you're stickerless, it gets put in whatever logbook or electronic system that houses the calibration management. And essentially that instrument is now good to go until its next calibration frequency. For the standards, if the standard goes through the same calibration process and fails at one of its functions, again, there's an out of tolerance event. Essentially, you're notified as the customer, if you're sending these out for calibration, that the instrument has failed at one of its functions. That triggers an investigation, because if this instrument was out in the field saying all these instruments are good, meanwhile this wasn't good, then all of the calibrations that took place come into question. And so what happens is what's called a reverse traceability matrix. That reverse traceability report essentially pulls out of your system, whether it's your calibration system or your CMMS, where did I use this standard? Now, this is where most systems fall on its face, is because today's world there are multifunction standards. Let me walk through that a little bit. So you have a work order where you've said, I'm going to test this instrument and I'm going to use this standard. But you haven't said, I'm going to use this standard's one function. And when the standard gets calibrated, it may pass for temperature and humidity and foul pH, or it may pass pH and humidity and foul temperature. So let's assume this instrument went out for calibration and all the functions passed except temperature. In order for you to search the system, your CMMS or EAM system, on where this standard was used, you can't say where was it used only to measure temperature, at least not very easily. And so you're looking today, in today's world, where was the standard used? And that could be, anywhere you've used pressure and humidity and all kinds of other things where it's looking across many, many records. Whereas if it truncated down just to temperature, you would only have to look at temperature. So there's some issues that exist in the typical approach to how a CMMS system handles calibration, if it handles it at all. Many of them do not. So anyway, reverse traceability looks at the functions of the standard. Well, no, it doesn't. Sorry, and it should. Looks at the standards themselves down to serial number and where were they used on work orders. So where was this standard used? Pull all those work orders out between the date, the last time the standard passed and when it failed or had an out of tolerance event. And then I have to do an investigation against all those things. You would like to actively avoid as many of those investigations as you can because they take up a lot of resources to do. And so you want to make sure that you get down to the functions of the standard, if possible, at the work order level. Hopefully CMMS systems catch up to this and alter that functionality. So anyway, you have instruments in the field, they have parameters, they have to be measured, they have to be calibrated. In order to do that, you need standards. The standard needs to be more accurate than the instrument that it's measuring, and those standards also need to be calibrated. Manage all that inside your work order system, keep your cal certifications clean, and you'll continue to support high quality operations. So I'm sure there's a lot of stuff I'm missing here, and my friends Ross and John from CalOpX will probably correct me on a bunch of this stuff. Honestly, if you need help in calibration or calibration management, or making sure you're doing the right level of calibration, getting your program set up for success, the folks over at CalOpX are fantastic at that. This is not a paid sponsorship or nothing. They're just really great guys. So give them a buzz and let's get the right system in place to support your quality manufacturing process. Have a great day.